Good evening, and welcome to PokèClass, brought to you by Pokéball TV, a show where we try to educate viewers as best as we can about everything Pokemon. Last week on Togo Speaks, Togo received a very interesting question about appraising Pokeballs without the use of modern technology. I think Togo did a fantastic job in his specific episode, and I was quite inspired to actually cover Pokeballs myself in tonight's session of PokèClass. I want to cover everything about Pokeballs, from the very first Pokeball to where we stand today, everything. And of course, at the end, I will give homework as always for people that are interested and want to learn more about Pokeballs in their own free time. But with that being said, let's get started. Imagine a world where Pokeballs don't exist. Things that we take for granted become very confusing. Take for example, living spaces. I don't know if you're a history buff or not, but we live today in very comfortable houses. But people many years ago, thousands of years ago, they used to live in very, very small huts, places where you could, at best, maybe fit one or two Pokemon in, and even that would be a little bit cramped. So people, of course, naturally at that time, with the absence of Pokeballs as well, rarely had Pokemon, and the ones that had Pokemon had one, maybe at best two Pokemon at their disposal. A lot of the people living in those times were also quite wary of Pokemon. They used to think of them as a threat. So the only time that someone would have a Pokemon were Pokemon that had a very docile nature, that were domesticated, or Pokemon that maybe was sick and someone helped that Pokemon and they ended up bonding. That's how people would end up having Pokemon. Now, I have to say, people in those times had a much stronger bond with their Pokemon than people today. And that's not to say that people today don't have a good bond with their Pokemon. They have a very good bond even to this day. But think of it like this. Imagine being in the Pal Park with your Pokemon your whole life. The Pokemon does not go in a Pokeball. It's always with you no matter what you do. So of course you're not going to end up having a much better bond than current times. But all of that changed when a group of people combined created the very first Pokeball. And we don't have the name for the very first person who created the Pokeball because I think it was a collaborated effort. That's why. So, introducing the very first Pokeball. Before I even get started with talking about the very first Pokeball, I just want to say a quick thank you to Devon Corporation and Sylph Corporation for helping me in my research for tonight's episode of PokèClass. So thank you so much. Now, let's get into the very first Pokeball. You'll notice this Pokeball looks similar to the modern Pokeball, but there are differences to it. The very top portion that you see is in dark orange, which is different from how you see it in our current Pokeballs, which is red in color, right? Now, the bottom part, if you look at it, has a more of a woody structure to it, whereas the modern one is completely white in color. There are other differences too, but these two are the biggest differences visually that you can see. Right in the middle, you have yourself a latch. This latch actually serves as a locking mechanism. In modern Pokeballs, this kind of a latch doesn't exist because this latch is mechanical. The modern Pokeballs have the automatic detection system for locking and unlocking a Pokeball. How this would work is a lot of trainers would open up the latch, throw the Pokeball at the Pokemon, and once the Pokemon would enter the Pokeball as energy, this latch would lock itself again. Now, how that would work is a little bit complicated to explain, but think of it like this. When you see a seesaw and you try to sit on the portion that's higher than the other one, you'll notice that that part goes down and the other part goes up. It's the same mechanical locking structure, so there's nothing automatic going on with this Pokeball. It's just using laws of physics to lock the mechanism as soon as a Pokeball enters. And of course, it's the same story of a Pokemon coming out or not coming out. There is one more thing that you might be curious about, which is this part at the very top. You might be wondering, well, what is this? Well, this specifically contained a very specific calming agent that would calm down a Pokemon after you catch it. And you might be wondering, well, why is that necessary? Because we don't have it in our modern Pokeballs. That's true. Something like this doesn't exist in modern Pokeballs, and that's because a lot of the modern Pokemon are already quite docile in nature. But back in that time, since Pokeballs were not a thing, Pokemon were a lot more aggressive in nature. So if you caught them, you needed for them to have a bit of a calmer nature. So this had the calming agent that would over time calm down the Pokemon. Now something like this is not needed anymore. Now let's talk about the catch rate for this specific Pokeball. Now, before I even talk about catch rate, there is one thing that has to be specified very clearly. Whenever you're trying to compare how good a Pokeball is, and Togo already talked about the average, but what I'm going to be talking about actually is the catch rate. You need to have something that you compare a Pokeball's catch rate with, right? In our case, we use the standard Pokeball. This is what we use. So if you think of this Pokeball as the standard 1 times chance of catch, the catch rate is 1 time, then you can compare all the other Pokeballs in comparison to the normal Pokeball. Now, if you look at the old Pokeball, you'll notice that one had a catch rate of 0.75. So it's not as effective as the current Pokeball, because otherwise this would have a 1x catch rate chance, right? Because it would match with the modern Pokeball. But this was actually a little bit weaker than the modern Pokeball that we have. But I don't think it's fair to actually critique the makers of this Pokeball, because this was quite a breakthrough of its time. You know, back in the day, people really didn't think something like a Pokeball was possible. You know, it's something in life is always impossible until there's that one person that does it, and then all of a sudden it becomes possible and everybody starts doing it. In this case, it wasn't one person that did it, it was a group of people working together, but the idea is the same. This Pokeball specifically was created using Apricorn and Tumblestone. Now, remember how I talked about how the colors don't match? Well, if you look at Tumblestone and then you look at the color over here for the Pokeball, they match. It's because the old Pokeballs were created using Tumblestone. And the other thing it used was an Apricorn. Nothing specific, just an Apricorn. You'll notice that the color at the bottom matches very much the color of an Apricorn. So this is why the old Pokeball looks so different color-wise from the modern one, because it was the components that were used to make the old Pokeball was quite different from the modern one. But of course, as I said, as soon as one person does something that appears impossible, there are many people that jump in and try to make whatever's been invented better. So this Pokeball, of course, also had many renovations and many improvements over time. Introducing the old Great Ball and the old Ultra Ball. Now, of course, they have their differences from the modern one, but if you notice at the bottom, you'll notice that it says for the items that are needed, it requires iron chunk as well. In the composition of these Great Balls and Ultra Balls was the involvement of iron chunk. It seems like they wanted to fortify these Pokeballs, wanted to make them better, so their idea was to add iron chunks alongside Tumblestone and Apricorn. Now, the iron actually does seem visible a little bit, not as much in the Great Ball, of course, but if you look at the bottom part of the Ultra Ball, you'll notice that the bottom part is not Apricorn anymore. It's very much exclusively all iron. There might be Apricorn right under it, but there is a covering of iron on top of it to really fortify the Ultra Ball, and I have to say, it really is fortified. Look at the catch rate for Ultra Ball. Ultra Ball is 1.5 times effective, and if you look at the modern Great Ball, the modern Great Ball is also 1.5 times effective. The old Ultra Ball, that one is 2.25 times effective. This is actually better than the modern Ultra Ball, because the modern Ultra Ball is 2 times effective. So this Ultra Ball, the old one, was superior to the modern one, but why do we have a worse performing Ultra Ball now when the old one was so much better? And that's a very good question to ask. The answer I received from Devon Corporation and Sylph Corporation is that this old Ultra Ball was quite heavy, because it might say that it requires iron chunks for both Great Ball and Ultra Ball, but Ultra Ball required more iron chunks to create, and these iron chunks ended up really adding a lot of weight to the Ultra Ball, which they think in current times is not very feasible for trainers to have, because they won't be able to throw it to begin with. So the current Ultra Ball is a lot lighter, and you only lose minimal catch rate performance. So that's their explanation for why the current Ultra Ball is not as good as the old one. Now make of that what you will. But of course, there were other sorts of Pokeballs as well that were created back in the day that don't exist anymore, that were very specific to that time. Let's take a look at a few of those. Introducing from left to right, Feather Ball, Wing Ball, Jet Ball. And before you even ask the question, I'm going to answer it before you even ask it. These Pokeballs don't exist anymore because they served a very specific purpose. You see, Pokemon in our times are quite accustomed to humans. They know that people try to catch them for various reasons, and some Pokemon actually prefer having a trainer as well. So they purposely approach humans and try to get into battles with them, especially the elusive Pokemon too, like maybe for example a Pidgey, maybe a Tailo, maybe something like a Talonflame, anything of that sort. But back in the day, Pokemon and humans avoided one another as much as they could. That also means, maybe flying type Pokemon that are quite fast and quite elusive would just be in the air and try to run away from humans as much as they can. So catching them with the normal Pokeball, Great Ball, certainly Ultra Ball was very, very hard. So their solution was to actually create these three specific Pokeballs that would go really fast and go really far, and try to catch an unsuspecting flying type Pokemon, or any elusive Pokemon for that fact. These Pokemons were specifically designed for flying types, but you can use it on other Pokemon too, that's okay. Their only difference from other ones is that they just go very fast and very quick. And they're quite lightweight. Not necessarily lightweight in the sense that they're easy to lift, but how they work makes them lightweight from a subjective experience. So let's go through each one of these. We have the Feather Ball. You'll notice that the top part is blue now, and that's because it uses Sky Tumblestone now instead of the normal Tumblestone. Now Sky Tumblestone has a property which allows it to go a lot faster. It's more nimble, it's more lightweight, so it goes perfectly with the normal Feather Ball. And you'll notice that the catch rate on this one is 1 times, so it's almost as good as the modern Pokeball, and it's actually better than the old Pokeball, which is very surprising to say the least. After that you have Wing Ball, and you will be questioning, well, this has an iron chunk in there too, so then how is this easy to throw far away? And that's a very good question to ask. The way they would do this is the placement of the iron chunks. The iron chunks are a lot smaller than normal iron, and what they do is they attach them at specific parts. Think of it like a slingshot. When you sling your arm, things go a lot farther than if you just throw them like this. If you sling your hand, it goes a lot faster. This Pokeball had weights at specific corners, which meant that if you threw it, holding it a specific way, it would go a lot farther because of its momentum and its weight. So that's how they took care of the whole issue with the iron chunks being a part of it and making it stronger, but at the same time making sure it still goes far. And then of course the very last Jet Ball is the same, just more iron chunks to make it a bit more stronger and fortified, at the same time keeping it nimble, keeping it light. From a subjective experience, of course, they were still a little bit heavy because of the iron chunks, but because of the placement of the iron chunks, you could still sling it really far away. The catch rates for the wing ball 1.5, for the jet ball it's 2, exactly similar to the great ball and exactly similar to the modern ultra ball, a little bit weaker than the old ultra ball. But this is how these Pokeballs worked, and they don't exist anymore because, as you can imagine, we don't have a need for them anymore. There were other Pokeballs as well that were very much specific for the time, but a little bit of that has spilled over into our current Pokeballs as well, and I'm going to introduce those Pokeballs to you right now. Introducing to you Heavy Ball, Leaden Ball, and Gigaton Ball. From left to right. Now these Pokeballs look very, very different from the Pokeballs we've seen so far, and that's because they served a very specific case of catching Pokemon that were heavy. Pokemon back in the day used to be bigger by default, but so that means they had more weight to them as well, and these Pokeballs were perfect for that. However, their main use case was actually to catch heavy Pokemon like Aggron or Steelix or Onix or any other heavy Pokemon that you can think of. Being heavy meant you couldn't throw them very far though. You had to be very close to the Pokemon to throw this. But since it was meant to be for a heavier Pokemon, they move a lot slower so you could get close to them, so not like the elusive Pokemons that we were talking about. You'll notice that these are completely black, and that's because they use black Tumblestone and Apricorn in their creation. And black Tumblestone has a property that it's very, very heavy. This material is heavy by default, so and it's usually a lot sturdier as well. Now of course you have a black Tumblestone, and they covered the bottom part of the Pokeball with black Tumblestone as well, so that gave it the whole black appearance, but that meant that these Pokeballs were very strong. Of course the normal heavy ball is just 1x 1 times, but if you look at the next one, which is the Leaden Ball with the iron chunks in it, this one there seems to be a typo there, but it's actually 1.75 times. It's not 1.5, it's 1.75, and we should take a look and fix that. But it's a lot stronger than the Great Ball. It's just a little bit weaker than the Ultra Ball. So then if you look at the very last one, which is the Gigaton Ball, and that's not 2x, that's a 2.5 actually. So there's another typo there. But the Gigaton Ball was 2.5x, which is amazing. It's actually a lot more than the modern Ultra Ball. It's actually more than the old Ultra Ball as well. So quite effective, and just like I said, for all the flying type balls, you can use these heavy balls as well for catching any Pokemon. You don't necessarily have to use it for Pokemon that are heavy. So quite a strong Pokeball to have. The reason they don't kind of exist anymore is because of how heavy they are. It's kind of hard to throw them. It's not really necessary to have a Pokeball like that anymore. However, there is use of having a Pokeball that catches Pokemon better based on how heavy it is. So there is just a comprehensive one version of Heavy Ball that we have now, not like these multiple forms. That seems to be the norm with the modern Pokeballs. There's only one version, which is like the comprehensive best version of the old stuff, except for the flying balls. But the Heavy Ball we will get into in a little bit, the modern version of it. So these are all the Pokeballs that existed in the past. But what is the world like today? What are Pokeballs like today? Well, the modern Pokeball. This is the modern Pokeball. You've probably seen it a gazillion times already. This is the most standard Pokeball used across the board. The bread and butter of every person who wants to catch Pokemon. There are many companies in our current times that create this Pokeball. Companies like Silphsco and Devon Corporation, they create these Pokeballs, and ever since the whole Pokeball creation thing became commercialized, there were factories that were built for it. The whole game just completely changed for Pokeballs. Now they don't use tumblestones. Now they don't use apricorns anymore. It's a combination of different plastics and metals along with some advanced technology that is combined to create what we now call the Pokeball. It's very different from how things worked back in the day. There are some people that still create homemade version of Pokeballs and they still use apricorns for it. There are some people in Johto that do it. But by and large, most of the trainers use Pokeballs that are created in Pokeball factories now, thanks to the innovative work of Sylph Corporation, Devon Corporation, so many other corporations that exist. But we're only giving those two a shout out because they were quite helpful with creating this episode of PokèClass, of course. So, how is the modern Pokeball made? Well, some synthetic metals, plastics, and then advanced technology. Now, this advanced custom technology is what takes care of the whole latching mechanism. We don't have a mechanical latch anymore. It's all automatic. And all the other stuff as well that comes with the Pokeball, all that software and technology is proprietary, and it's also very confidential, so it's not really shared very publicly. But all of that is a part of the modern Pokeball. Now, the catch rate, of course, is 1 time, which is the standard that we use to compare with other Pokeballs. So then, of course, there are improved versions of Pokeballs as well. More specifically, the Great Ball and the Ultra Ball, right? Great Ball has a catch rate of 1.5x, as we said. Ultra Ball has a catch rate of 2x. And the items needed are very much the same synthetic metals, the same plastics, the same custom technology that is used. It's just that the synthetic metals and the plastics that they use are very different between the Great Ball and the Ultra Ball in comparison to the Pokeball. But everything else is primarily the same. And this is more of a recap because I know a lot of people know these sort of Pokeballs already. But what other kind of Pokeballs exist? There's so many, right? So what else do we have? Now, a Master Ball is the apex Pokeball. There's quite a few of these that exist. There's not that many that are available. And don't ever look at a Master Ball very carefully. A bit of a fun trivia. This almost looks like a Butterfree that's staring straight ahead. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. But it looks like a Butterfree if you look very closely. Now, how a Master Ball is made, I do not know. I tried to ask Devon Corp. I asked the specific Sylph Corporation. I even went and asked a person called Kurt that lives in the Johto region, creates his own Pokeballs, on how it's made. He had no idea how to make a Master Ball, and of course Sylph and Devon Corporation refused to make a comment on how it's made. But this is the Apex Master Ball. There's only a handful that exist, and it has a very high catch rate, 255 times. In fact, the claim that is being passed by all these Pokemon companies, Pokeball manufacturing companies, is that it's impossible for a Pokemon to break out of this Master Ball. Now, we've never had a recorded case of that happening, but at the same time, there's not that many Master Balls to begin with, so it's a little bit hard to test this claim, but at least the number we do know, the catch rate has been provided to us, which is 255 times. It's so amazing what humans are capable of doing once they put their mind to it. From saying we can't create something like a Pokeball to creating the first Pokeball to getting to this point where we create a ball that no Pokemon can escape out of is truly magnificent. So we have the Master Ball. Things can't get any better than that, but there are other sorts of Pokeballs that are very much specific to certain use cases and needs, depending on what you want to do. So let's get into all of those right now. Okay, so from left to right we have Safari Ball, Fast Ball, Lure Ball. Now, let's talk about the Safari Ball because I think not everybody has seen it, but this is the Pokeball that you receive when you go to any Safari Zone. They give you this specific Pokeball to catch Pokemon with. Now, Safari Ball is quite interesting because it has that camouflage color at the very top, but it has a very standard catch rate. It's actually the same catch rate as a Pokeball. The top part is mainly aesthetic. it is used to convey the safari zone feeling to the people that use it, and it's a bit of memorabilia. It always reminds you that you caught this Pokemon in the safari zone using a safari ball. So other than that, this Pokeball is quite identical to a standard Pokeball that you see. You of course then have the fastball. Now fastball has a catch rate of 4 times if the Pokemon is quite speedy. Now there is a way of measuring speed on a Pokemon, and if that Pokemon ends up exceeding a certain metric points of speed, it has a 4 times effective catch rate. I'm not sure exactly what the speed is, but I think it's 100 metric speed if it's faster than that. If it's not, then it behaves very similarly to a normal Pokeball, which is a 1-time catch rate. And at the very last, we had the Lure Ball, right? Lure Ball has a catch rate of 4 times if you're using it while you're fishing, if you encounter a Pokemon when you're fishing, but otherwise it just has a 1-time catch rate, very similar to a Pokeball again. All these Pokeballs, you'll notice, except for the Safari Ball, have this common similarity. There are conditions in which they do really good, and then there are conditions in which they just do as similar to a Pokeball. And it all depends on their composition and how they are created. We can't get into each one of these compositions because we'll run out of time for this show. But it is important to notice that a lot of people are enthusiasts of making sure that they catch their Pokemon in the specific Pokeball that they find fitting for that Pokemon. What do I mean by that? Well, think of something like, think of any Pokemon that's just very, very fast. Maybe something like Ninjask. Someone can say, well, I want to catch a Ninjask in a fastball because fastball is for speedy Pokemon, and it goes along well with a Ninjask. There's a lot of people that love to catch Pokemon in those specific kind of Pokeballs. Ladies and gentlemen, now a word from our sponsor. Water, source of life on Earth. Sustenance for humans, home to Pokemon. However, humans haven't really been kind to the oceans and seas. If this keeps up, future generations would have no access to water. It is my dream to set things right. We need a lot more water than we have today. Will you join us at Aqua Research Center? Let's see the future together. Let's move on to others. From left to right, we have the Love Ball, the Friend Ball, and then the Moon Ball. Let's look at the very left one, which is the Love Ball first. You'll notice it has a pink color on top, and then there's a heart shape on it. Love is certainly in the air tonight because this ball has a very specific purpose. If the wild Pokemon that you are battling is of the same species as the Pokemon you are using in battle, and it's the opposite gender from your Pokemon, the catch rate is 8 times normal. That's insane. 8 times normal is bonkers, right? But if both of those conditions are not met, then it performs just as good as a Pokeball. Again, a very niche case of catching Pokemon using a Love Ball. There can be some that you would want to catch in a Love Ball, and some trainers do use this one as well. Then in the middle you see Friend Ball. Friend Ball always has a catch rate of 1, similar to a Pokeball. And it says nothing beyond that, so you would think, well, it's just like a Pokeball, what's the difference? Well, I don't teach PokèClass just to appear on Pokeball TV and collect my paychecks. I actually really care that people that watch the show learn something, and I take pride in my work. So I'm gonna tell you exactly what this does, even though that's outside the scope of this specific episode. When you catch a Pokemon, I went on a huge rambling before on how people in the past had really great bonds with their Pokemon. Well, if you want to make your Pokemon bond stronger in present times, catch your Pokemon in a friend ball. Your friendship with the Pokemon is automatically going to be very high the moment you catch it in the friend ball. Now let's think about this. Why would you catch something in a friend ball? Well, maybe you have something like a Buneri. Buneri evolves with high friendship, so maybe you want to catch a Buneri in a friend ball so that it's easier to evolve that Buneri into a Lopunny. That could be one thing that you can do. Surely there are forms of Eevee that evolve based on friendship as well. Maybe that's what you want to do. It really does depend on you, but it does have its purpose. Never forget that. If I don't tell you these rationales, you're going to think that the friend ball is very similar to a normal Pokeball. Now, of course, let's look at the last one, which is the Moonball. Moonball is quite interesting because it has a 4 times catch rate on Pokemon that evolve using a Moonstone. So what are Pokemon that evolve using a Moonstone? Well, one I can think of is Clefairy. Clefairy, if you catch it in a Moonball, it's going to be 4 times as effective. But if the Pokemon doesn't evolve using a Moonstone, then it's just like a normal Pokeball. Even more specific case Pokemon, a lot of enthusiasts catch Clefairy in a Moonball because it kind of fits the theme of the Pokemon. But there are more specific use case Pokeballs that exist as well. There's so many that exist now in comparison to old times. So let's look at more of those. Okay, next ones are Dive Ball, Repeat Ball, and then Net Ball. Very interesting designs on all of these. Most of these are quite aesthetically pleasing to look at. Now let's look at the very left one, which is the Dive Ball. It says it's a 3.5 time catch rate if you are diving underwater, or if you're fishing, or if you are surfing. Otherwise it's 1 times. So this specific Pokeball is quite good if you are pretty much someone who loves to be in the seaside, in the ocean. This Pokeball is perfect to have because a lot of the water types that you'll see will be very good to catch in this one. The next one you have is a Repeat Ball. Now this Repeat Ball has a 3.5 time efficacy rate if you are catching a Pokemon you've caught already. Now what could be a case where someone wants to catch Pokemon in a Repeat Ball? Well, let's think about it, right? There are a lot of breeders that breed Pokemon. Some breed it for just general purposes, some breed it for competitive battles. They might want to have the same Pokemon until they get one that they think fits the right nature, fits the right moves that they want to have. So maybe you catch those Pokemon in a Repeat Ball, right? That can be a use case for that. And then Net Ball is for 3.5 times if you're catching a Pokemon that is a water or bug type. So it has a bit of an overlap with Dive Ball, but it also has its differences from a Dive Ball as well. But this one's 3.5 times effective. Very similar, all 3 of these are 3.5 times. Quite fascinating stuff. But that's not the end. There are even more variants of Pokeballs that exist. Introducing from left to right, Luxury Ball, Premier Ball, Dusk Ball. Now, I have to say these Pokeballs specifically are quite near and dear to my heart. I love all these Pokeballs. Luxury Ball has a 1x catch rate, but I think you already know by now. Whenever there is a Pokeball with 1x catch rate, it has other benefits that it gives you. Luxury Ball in specific is quite a luxurious ball, as the name suggests. So the Pokemon you catch in it usually has a very, very rapid friendship growth with overall. And it's the kind of growth that you don't see when you catch Pokemon in other Pokeballs. Now I don't want you to confuse this Pokeball with the Friend Ball that we just talked about. Friend Ball automatically increases friendship with your Pokemon upon catching it. But Luxury Ball doesn't automatically increase it. It's just that the growth of friendship is rapid compared to other Pokeballs. What I will say though is, if you're a bad person and you don't treat your Pokemon right, then the luxury ball is going to do nothing for you, because you still have to teach your Pokemon well. You have to take care of them, and that's when the growth of friendship is going to be rapid. Now, I'm sure you already know what the use cases of such a ball can be, so I'm not going to go into that. But let's look at the next one, which is Premier Ball. Again, catch rate is 1x, similar to a Pokeball. Now, you are quite accustomed to how this show works by now, so you're saying, well, there has to be a purpose for this one as well. And my answer is no. There really is no known purpose for this Pokeball to exist, actually. There's no benefits, there's no upsides, there's no caveats, there's no tricks. This ball just sort of exists for some reason. The only difference is that when you send out Pokemon in this Premier Ball, they have a bit of a reddish taint to them when they come out, whereas the normal Pokeball has a bit of a whiter taint when they come out. But I don't think that's enough to justify this. I mean, it looks cool. I like how it looks, but there's nothing to it, and I'm sure you've seen this Pokeball quite a lot when you go grocery shopping, you go shop for anything. If you spend a certain amount of money, they give you 1 or 2 or 3 of these to take with you. So in that sense, they're kind of uncommon to see. They're not sold. And people have a lot of theories as to why people the Premier Ball still exists, and I think based on what my theory is, and that has the most weight to it, my theory is that Premier Ball is actually just all the other Pokeballs that exist, or whenever the Pokemon manufacturing companies want to test a new sort of a Pokeball, they test, and if that Pokeball does not work, or is not up to the standard, or it doesn't perform as well as they think it should, what they do is they slather a bit of white coat on it, and then they don't want to throw these away because that would just be wasting, so they just send it over to these different grocery shops and stuff like that, and they'll tell them to hand it off over to people that they think deserve it. And I think then those grocery shops, what they do is they added this little bit of a lucrative thing where if you spend enough money, we'll give you this specific Pokeball that is not sold, because I don't think it's up to the standard of being sold, because these are failed experiments from the manufacturing companies of different Pokeballs. So they don't sell them, but they give them to you if you spend enough money in their shops. That's what I think this Premier Ball is. A failed experiment slathered with a white coat of paint and given to grocery shops who give it to you if you spend enough money in their shop. That's my theory. It's not 100% true, and you can have your own theories. There's others as well, but that's what I think. Last one, Dusk Ball. Now this one is quite interesting because it has a 3 times catch rate if you use it in a cave or if you use it at nighttime. Otherwise, it's just similar to a Pokeball 1 time. Now this is very interesting because half of the 24 hours is usually going to be at nighttime, on average, of course. So it's going to be good half of the day, most of the times. So it's always just good to have a few Dusk Balls if you are especially a Pokemon adventurer. I know a lot of people that do jobs at nighttime. A lot of the construction jobs take place at night, especially in places where they're digging up tunnels. A lot of the people there, construction workers, end up having a lot of Dusk Ball Pokemon that are stored in Dusk Balls because most of them were caught during work. So Dusk Ball appears a lot in that sense as well. But that's not all. There are more Pokeballs. So the Pokeball you see on the left is the Timer Ball, and the Pokeball you see on the right is the Nest Ball. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of a mathematical formula. So if you don't understand math, it's okay, just pretend like I'm talking in a different language, because if I was in your position, I would do the same thing. It's just that I've memorized the script for the show before the show takes place, so I can pretend like I know what I'm talking about. So get your math hats on, let's talk about it. Timer Ball has a very specific catch rate. It can be between 1 times to 4 times effective in comparison to a normal Pokeball, and it all depends on how many turns have taken place in battle. Now, this Timer Ball has custom technology that can determine a turn. Now, you might be thinking, well, in a battle, what does it mean to turn? Is it like, of course, battling Pokemon in real life is not like taking turns. It just kind of happens, right? And that makes sense. But it interprets turn as if the opponent Pokemon uses any move, or it tries to use a move, and it doesn't have to be an attacking move, it can be something like Iron Defense as well. It can detect it using its custom technology, and it counts that as one turn. The more turns it thinks has passed, the more effective it becomes. Now, the formula is actually it's in a minimum function, so it's either gonna be 4 times, or it's gonna be that really messy formula you see in the middle, which is 1 plus 0.5 times into turns passed minus 1. So it's gonna take whatever is the minimum out of this formula, or 4. So let's see how many turns need to take place until you hit the 4, right? Because 4 is the maximum it can be. So let's see at 10 turns, right? 10 turns have taken place. So you have turns passed is going to be 10 minus 1, 9. You multiply that by 0.3. 0.3 into 9. Think of it just as doing 3 times 9, which is 27. In this case, it's going to be 2.7 plus 1, 3.7, right? So after 10 turns have passed, you have to choose the minimum between 3.7 and 4. In this case, it would pick 3.7, but that means literally after that, on the 11th turn onwards, your timer ball is gonna perform at its maximum efficiency rate, which means that after it's been 10 turns, just start throwing timer balls instead of ultra balls if you're trying to catch something that's hard to catch, because timer ball is gonna have a 4 times efficacy rate. Now that's how the timer ball works, and it's quite a reliable. A lot of trainers, ace trainers, cool trainers, trainers that want to compete and battle gym leaders, they keep a lot of timer balls on themselves. The other one is nest ball, and this one also has a catch rate between 1 to 4x. And it really depends on how strong the wild Pokemon is. The weaker the Pokemon, the easier it is to catch on the nest ball. Now again, we get into some math formulas. Fun, which says, 41 minus your Pokemon level divided by 10. Now it automatically determines what your Pokemon level is in comparison to the wild Pokemon. We're not sure how levels work. Of course, there's no health bars in real life over your Pokemon, but these Pokeballs try to think of battling and everything in more of a game sort of sense. Think of real life being a game, and imagine if these Pokemon had health on top of them and maybe a level of sort. Then think of it from that perspective, and this is how these Pokeballs interpret things. So it determines the level of your Pokemon through its inner software. It determines the level of the opponent Pokemon through its inner software. And then it determines through this mathematical formula if it's what the efficacy should be. So this is the formula for nest ball. You can run a few numbers in there and try to determine percentages, but I think by now half of the people are asleep listening to mathematical computations. And I forgot the script for doing this math, so I forgot myself. So let's move on to the next Pokeball. Here we go. Let's talk about these ones. The one you see on the left is level ball. The one on the right is the heavy ball. If you remember, I said there is a version of the old heavy ball, gigaton ball, and leaden ball in today's version, which is more of a comprehensive version of it. But level ball is quite interesting. It has a catch rate between 1 to 8 times. It really tries to turn your Pokemon into a level, gamify your Pokemon, turn real life into a game. It takes and tries to compute the opponent's Pokemon level as well. And it sees, it checks to see if your Pokemon level is equal to, or if it's less than the wild Pokemon's level. It performs just as well as a normal Pokeball. If it is more than if your Pokemon's level is more than the wild Pokemon, but it's not double, then it does 2 times. If it is double or more, and then it does 4 times. And if it is 4 times, then if it's 4 times or more, then it does 8 1X. So when do you use this kind of Pokeball? Well, you use it for Pokemon where your Pokemon is really, really, really strong, and you are trying to catch Pokemon that is, to be very, 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 very weak. Now, of course, you can't tell in your mind what your Pokemon's level is. I wish they had some sort of a mechanism to tell you that. But you can reasonably infer that your Pokemon is a lot stronger. So maybe try using a level ball in those cases and you'll get good results. The other one is the heavy ball. And the catch rate is hard to explain. But essentially, the rule is just throw this Pokeball at a heavy Pokemon and pray for the best. As long as the Pokemon's heavy, this is going to perform really, really well. But we can't get into the whole math side of how well a heavy ball does in this specific episode of PokèClass because we are starting to run out of time slowly. And then for the last 3 case-specific Pokeballs for tonight, starting with the one on the very left, we have Heal Ball. You'll notice that the Heal Ball looks very similar to the Pokemon Audino. The color palettes match very closely. With a catch rate of 1x, it is exactly similar to a Pokeball. And you might be wondering, well, why use a Heal Ball then? And the reason people use Heal Ball, and this is especially relevant for people who travel from city to city, town to town, they go through caves, forests, seasides. They inadvertently end up seeing Pokemon that are maybe injured or they're sick. You can use the Heal Ball to catch them, and immediately upon catching them, all the status ailments that Pokemon has, all the injuries that Pokemon has will be immediately healed. Even if the Pokemon is sick, you can still catch them in the Heal Ball, and the Heal Ball can give them a temporary energy boost. Think of it like when you're sick and you drink a energy drink that is filled with electrolytes. The same kind of effect is what happens with the Heal Ball. It gives you enough time that you can rush that Pokemon to the Pokemon Center and get whatever illness it is suffering with taken care of. So that's the purpose of the Heal Ball. The one you see in the middle is called the Dream Ball. Dream Ball resembles the Pokemon Musherna very, very closely. Musherna, of course, being in the Unova region. Dream Ball, as the name suggests, is very effective if you use it on a Pokemon that's asleep. It is 4 times effective if you use it on a sleeping Pokemon, whether in battle or outside of battle. But if you use it on a Pokemon that's awake, its effect is the same as a Pokeball. So there's very specific cases where you use a Dream Ball. And then the one on the very right, and this is the most popular Pokeball of them all, is called the Quick Ball. It is almost as popular as the Dusk Ball, almost as popular as the Timer Ball and the Ultra Ball when it comes to competitive trainers and the kind of Pokeballs that they keep. Quick Ball is 5 times more effective than a normal Pokeball if you use it immediately at the start of the battle. If you use it right afterwards, its efficacy will go back down to 1 times the normal Pokeball. So you can only use it at the start, and it's quite of a contrast from the Timer Ball. If you remember, the Timer Ball gets better and better the longer the battle goes. But Quick Ball is the exact opposite. Quick Ball is very good immediately at the start, but right afterwards it just goes back to being a normal Pokeball. It is a very popular Pokeball among people that do competitive battling. Anyways, moving on. From left to right we have Cherish Ball, Palpark Ball, and then the Beast Ball. Now these are rare Pokeballs, as it says in the title. You might not have seen any one of these, and that's because they're not made that much. Some of them are out of production. If you happen to live in the right space, in the right location, you might have seen the Palpark Ball, but otherwise you might not have seen any one of these. Cherish Ball was in creation for about a week many years ago. Ever since then, production of Cherish Ball have stopped, and the catch rate on Cherish Ball was often miscalculated. A lot of the Pokemon manufacturing companies said that this was actually 50 times effective than a normal Pokeball, but the actual tests after it was launched revealed that it was just 1 time, so similar to a normal Pokeball. It does look very menacing, but it's similar to a Pokeball. That really compelled all these manufacturing companies to stop developing this Pokeball. But there became a very popular rumor among people that if you see a Cherish Ball anywhere nowadays, there's going to be a legendary or a pseudo-legendary Pokemon already in that Pokeball. Now, I don't know if those things are true or not, but there's a lot of theories that are being made that this Cherish Ball would perform really well against legendary Pokemon for some reason, but otherwise it would do very poorly. Now, of course, all of this is conjecture and hearsay, so take it with a grain of salt. Next, we have the Pal Park Ball, and as the name suggests, it works really well in the Pal Park. It has a 255 time catch rate if you use it in Pal Park. That's exactly similar to a Master Ball. Very durable, very good if you use it at the right location. But if you're not in the Pal Park, it works just similar to a normal Pokeball. Isn't that something? Quite interesting. And then the last one that looks like intergalactic kind of a Pokeball. This one's called the Beast Ball, and it's quite unique because it was specifically designed to catch Ultra Beasts in the Alola region. If you use it on a Beast Pokemon, it has a 5 times catch rate, only on Beast Pokemon. But if you don't use it on Ultra Beasts, it has a 0.1 times the catch rate. That is abysmal. I don't think we've seen anything so far that has this much of a change or variance in catch rates, depending on what you use them on. Usually, if the worst that it gets is 1 times, but in this case, it's actually at 0.1x, which is terrible. But it looks pretty cool, and it has a very specific case. Even people that live in Alola, and if you're watching from Alola, please do let me know by sending me your favorite postcards and mails from Alola. But even people in Alola don't know of the Beast Ball all that much. They've heard of it, they know it exists, but only a few people have it because it's only designed to tackle Ultra Beasts, and that's not a very common occurrence in Alola anymore. But that's not all. There are even more interesting and forbidden Pokeballs that exist. Introducing to you 2 mysterious Pokeballs that we're not even sure exist or they don't, whether it's just a joke or a prank. There's a lot of mystery surrounding them, but the one on the left is called the Strange Ball. The one on the right is called the Origin Ball. Now, the Strange Ball, there's only ever been one that has been discovered on the coast a little bit south of Lake Valor in the Sinnoh region. This was quite beat up, but it was still in a pretty good shape surprisingly, and they dated this specific Pokeball and they said that this Pokeball seems to be many thousands of years old, which is interesting because it has a very modern design to it. But then what's even more interesting is that its catch rate is 0.75, which is similar to the old Pokeball, right? But it looks nothing like it. It looks like a modern Pokeball. The color is quite neutral. There's only ever been one that we've found so far. And when we talked to different Pokemon companies, and actually at the time when this was discovered, there was a huge controversy because no one took ownership of this specific Pokeball. No company has ever taken ownership of this Pokeball, that they created it. But at the same time, we know that this exists because we found one of them, but we've never found any other afterwards. Now, this could be a very elaborate prank by someone, or it could actually be something more. There could be something more to it, but we're not completely sure, of course. And the one on the right, this one actually is even more speculative than the one on the left, because at least in the left one, we have found one Pokeball of that sort. And they called that one on the left the Strange Ball, right? The one on the right is called the Origin Ball. We're not sure what the catch rate is because we've never seen one ourselves. But the mentions of a Pokeball like this has been mentioned in old hieroglyphs on old caves in the Sinnoh region. There are mentions of a ball that they call the Origin Ball. So we call this the Origin Ball as well. The leading theory is that it has something to do with the legendary Pokemon of Sinnoh, Palkia, Dialga. But of course, that's just a theory. at this point. And the hieroglyphs don't go into much detail as well on the caves, but this is what they kind of drew on the walls, and then they didn't color it, but they put like a little bit of a text that said the color red. So this is a recreation of what we saw in those caves, but this might not have existed. Maybe it existed, but at least it's been lost to time, and we're not sure what purpose it served overall. So this is the comprehensive guide on all the Pokeballs that exist. Or is it everything? We covered a lot of Pokeballs, starting with the history, how Pokeball works, modern day Pokeballs, specific Pokeball use cases, but there are 2 more as well. But that's homework. There's 2 Pokeballs I would like you to go and do research on. And those 2, I'm not even going to name them. Or maybe if you want me to, I can name them, but I don't think I will. This one on the left, and then this one on the right. These 2 Pokeballs are quite interesting, and see if you can look into what these Pokeballs are. There's 3 things I want you to do. Figure out the name, figure out their catch rate, figure out what they're for, why were they created, what was the point of having these Pokeballs. Do these 3 things for these 2 Pokeballs, and in the next PokèClass, I'm going to read some of the responses that people have sent, and then of course I will give you the correct answer to this question as well. Thank you so much for joining this session of PokèClass. I know this was a long lesson, but now you are very equipped to go out there and know what each Pokeball is, what it's for, its purpose, and everything, because we covered almost every Pokeball that exists under the earth. Thank you so much for joining PokèClass. I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.